Okay, let's unpack this. If I simply say the name Bill and I follow it with the name Nye, your brain does something automatic, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's almost Pavlovian.
It is. You hear the chant.
Bill, 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 Bill.
Exactly. It's like a reflex for, what, 2 or 3 generations now?
At least. It's hardwired into the cultural neural network at this point.
It really is. You instantly picture the bow tie. You see the powder blue lab coat.
And you hear the sound effects, the wacky guitar riffs.
Science rules. But here is where it gets really, really interesting for our deep dive today. We are sitting here. It's January 24th, 2026.
Right.
And if you look at the headlines from just the last, say, 12 to 18 months, the picture of this man has changed so dramatically.
Totally.
The 90s nostalgia, it almost feels like it belongs to a different person entirely. We aren't just talking about a children's show host anymore.
No, not at all. We are looking at a figure who has undergone this profound evolution. In fact, if we rewind just about a year to January 4th, 2025, we find Bill Nye in the East Room of the White House.
A slightly different setting than Nye Labs.
Just a bit. He is standing there while President Biden awards him the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Which is the nation's highest civilian honor. I mean, that's not something they just hand out.
No. This is the same award given to civil rights icons, to world-changing politicians, to people who have, fundamentally altered the fabric of American life.
And that came right after he finally got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2024.
Right on the heels of it.
Wow.
So you have this 1-2 punch of major cultural and political recognition.
It's wild when you really stop and think about it. He's standing there with the president, accepting an honor usually reserved for the heavies of history.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, this is the same guy who used to dip marshmallows in liquid nitrogen and parody Nirvana songs to explain air pressure.
It is remarkable trajectory. But I think to really understand why he received that medal and why he's still such a fixture in the conversation in 2026, we have to look past the caricature.
We have to.
We have to look at the resume that most people completely ignore or just don't know exists.
The resume is actually insane. I mean, we're talking about a mechanical engineer for Boeing. We're talking about a stand-up comedian, a patent holder for, and I am not making this up, we will get into this later, ballet shoes. The ballet shoes.
Yes. And in recent years, a guy who stood on a national stage and told the world the planet was on effing fire.
That was a pivotal moment. That was the shift from the science guy to the science advocate, or perhaps even the science warrior.
So what does this all mean? Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a guy who started out winning a Steve Martin look-alike contest became one of the most influential and at times controversial voices in American science history.
How do you bridge that gap? The gap between, say, Mr. Wizard and modern climate advocacy.
Exactly. And to do that, we have combed through extensive biographical records, career retrospectives, patent filings, and all the details of his recent accolades right up through 2025.
So we are going to strip away the sound effects and look at the man.
So buckle up. We are going way beyond the theme song. I think we should start where all good stories start. The origin. And in Bill Nye's case, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. It actually fell right into a high-stakes, top-secret government facility.
This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the research. You think of Bill Nye as this nerdy kid from D.C., born in November 1955. You imagine him playing with chemistry sets, but his parents...
His parents were like characters out of a spy novel.
They really were. Let's start with his mom, Jacqueline Jenkins Nye.
Jacqueline was a force of nature. She wasn't just a mom in the 1950s sense. She was a Goucher girl.
A Goucher girl. That sounds like a squad name.
In a way, it was. She was an alumna of Goucher College. Now, during World War II, the U.S. Navy had a very specific problem.
They needed code breakers.
They needed code breakers.
Possibly.
Badly. They needed people who were highly educated, disciplined, and capable of intense pattern recognition to crack German and Japanese military ciphers.
And they went to Goucher.
They specifically recruited women from Goucher College because of the school's reputation for academic rigor. They were looking for the best and brightest.
So while other moms might have been, I don't know, baking casseroles, which I'm sure she did too, Bill Nye's mom was literally cracking enemy codes.
Essentially, yes. She was working on the codes that determine the movement of fleets and the outcome of battles. Bill Nye has this great line about her. He said she wasn't Rosie the Riveter.
She was Rosie the top-secret code breaker.
Exactly, which is so much cooler.
And that secrecy wasn't just a job requirement. It became a personality trait, right? It kind of defined her.
It permeated the household. Nye recalls asking her about the war when he was growing up. Most veterans, eventually, they might share a story or two. But Jacqueline,
What would she say?
she would just laugh and say, "You can't talk about it."
Wow, that creates a very specific environment for a child to grow up in.
It does. It creates an environment where intelligence is valued, but also where knowledge is serious business. It teaches you that there are secrets in the world, there are puzzles to be solved, and sometimes the stakes are life and death.
It's not just trivia.
Not at all.
And then there's his dad, Edwin, Ned Nye, also a World War II vet, but
Yeah.
his experience was, well, it was much darker.
Much darker. Ned Nye was a contractor. He was on Wake Island in the Pacific, building an airstrip when the war broke out.
And Wake Island was one of the first places to be attacked.
It was overrun by Japanese forces almost immediately. Ned was captured.
And he wasn't just held for a few weeks. This wasn't a short-term thing.
No, he spent 4 years in a Japanese prisoner of war camp.
4 years. That is, it's unfathomable. And this brings us to a crucial detail that I think explains so much about Bill Nye's later obsessions.
Yes.
No way to tell time.
Right. Imagine that. You are in a camp, starving, unsure if you will ever leave, and you have no way to measure the passage of time. Time is the only thing you have, and yet you can't measure it.
That loss of orientation must have been maddening. It could break a person's mind.
It could. So how do you keep a grip on reality? How do you know if it's noon or 2 p.m.?
You use science.
You use science. Ned Nye learned to tell time using the shadow of a shovel handle.
That is incredible. Just sheer ingenuity born of desperation.
Is survival through observation. He didn't have a Rolex, but he had the sun. He had the physics of the solar system. He learned to read the length and angle of the shadow to know the time of day.
And it gave him a sense of control.
In a situation where he had absolutely none. And that trauma, or perhaps that coping mechanism, sparked a lifelong obsession, didn't it?
It did. After the war, Ned Nye became obsessed with sundials.
Totally obsessed. He wrote a book about them. He dragged young Bill around to look at them.
Mm.
He passed that fascination directly to his son.
Which feels like a quirky dad hobby until you realize that decades later, Bill Nye ends up working with NASA on the Mars rovers to put a sundial on Mars.
We are getting ahead of ourselves, but you were so right.
It all connects, but you can see the foundation right there. The codebreaker mom who values logic and patterns, the survivor dad who values observation and mechanics.
That is the DNA of curiosity that built Bill Nye.
So you've got this kid with high-powered genetics. He goes to Sidwell Friends School on a scholarship, which is a big deal in D.C., and then heads to Cornell University to study mechanical engineering.
He graduates in 1977, and this is where the Sagan connection happens.
Yes. The Carl Sagan. The man, the myth, the turtleneck.
The icon.
Yeah.
So Nye took an astronomy class with Carl Sagan at Cornell. Now, for those listening who might be younger or who might not appreciate the context, in the 1970s and 80s, Carl Sagan was the voice of science.
He was it. He was the guy.
He hosted Cosmos. He made the universe feel poetic and accessible. He wasn't just a researcher. He was a master communicator.
And Nye was just a face in the lecture hall.
At first, yes. But years later, in 1987, Nye went to his 10-year reunion. He managed to get a meeting with Sagan.
That must have been nerve-wracking.
I'm sure. At this point, Nye is living in Seattle, tinkering with comedy, thinking about doing a TV show.
His pitch to Sagan was it was very engineering-focused.
What was the idea? He told Sagan, I want to do a show about bridges and bicycles. I want to do a show about technology. Because that's what Nye was, an engineer. He looked at the world in terms of gears and trusses.
And Sagan stopped him.
He did. And this is the moment that changed the trajectory of educational TV. Sagan said, and this is a near direct quote, focus on pure science. Kids resonate to pure science rather than technology.
That is such a subtle distinction, but it feels profound. What did he really mean by that?
Well, think about it. Technology changes. A show about how a fax machine works is boring in 1990 and obsolete by 2000.
Right?
Technology is the application. But science is the fundamental truth. Gravity is gravity. Photosynthesis is photosynthesis. The laws of thermodynamics don't go out of style.
So Sagan was saying, don't show them the gadget. Show them the rule that makes the gadget possible.
Exactly. He realized that to capture a child's imagination, or anyone's imagination really, you don't explain how a gear works. You explain why the gear turns. You explain the forces of the universe.
And that advice is the core philosophy of Bill Nye the Science Guy. That's the whole show right there.
It's the whole formula.
But before he could become the science guy, he had to be the Boeing guy.
That's right. Post-Cornell, he's in Seattle. He's working for Boeing and Sunstrand Data Control.
And I think people gloss over this. They think, oh, he was an engineer, like he sat at a desk and did math. But he was working on actual heavy hardware.
Very heavy. He invented something called a hydraulic resonance suppressor tube for the Boeing 747.
Which is a very fancy string of words.
It sounds like something you'd ask Scotty to fix on the Enterprise.
The resonance suppressors are offline, Captain.
It does. But it's a critical piece of safety equipment. Basically, the horizontal stabilizer, the little wing at the back of the plane, had a tendency to vibrate.
Yeah.
If that vibration matches the natural frequency of the material, you get resonance. And resonance can shake a structure apart.
Like an opera singer shattering a wine glass. But the wine glass is a jumbo jet full of people.
Precisely. That is the perfect analogy. Nye figured out a way to route hydraulic fluid through a tube to dampen that vibration.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing a scientist on TV yet. He was literally fixing resonance issues on 747s.
That's high-stakes engineering. It also creates a lot of credibility. He isn't an actor who learned to read a teleprompter. He understands the math.
He really does. And yet, despite that success, he had a different dream. He wanted to be an astronaut.
The dream of every science-minded kid.
He applied to NASA's astronaut training program 4 times. Rejected. Every single time.
Ouch. That has to be a humbling reality check. You're smart enough to fix the plane, but they won't let you fly it into space.
It is. But that rejection kept him on Earth. It kept him in Seattle. And while he was engineering by day, something else was bubbling up in the evenings.
The comedy, and this is the part that always cracks me up. The catalyst for his comedy career wasn't a burning desire to tell jokes.
No.
It was a Steve Martin look-alike contest.
It was 1978, and if you look at photos of Bill Nye from that era, the gray suit, the hair, the prominent nose, the sort of wild-eyed expression, he really does look like Steve Martin.
A dead ringer. And he won the contest, right?
He did, and that victory gave him a taste of the spotlight. He started doing impressions at parties. He realized, hey, I like making people laugh. I like the energy of a room.
So he starts living this double life.
A total double life.
Yeah.
Paint the picture for us.
Okay. It's a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. By day, he is at Sunstrand Data Control, working on laser gyroscope systems, which, by the way, are used for navigation in missiles and planes.
Very serious, very precise work.
Exactly. Then the whistle blows. He goes home, takes a nap, wakes up, drives to a comedy club, and does stand-up.
That combination, laser gyroscopes and hecklers, is rare.
It's incredibly rare. Usually you have people who are very analytical or you have people who are very performative. It's left brain versus right brain.
And Nye was bridging that gap in his own life before he ever did it on screen. He was learning how to take complex thoughts and make them punchy.
Finally, in October 1986, he hits a breaking point.
He quits Boeing.
He takes the leap. He decides to go full-time into entertainment, and he lands on this local Seattle sketch show called Almost Live.
Now, for our listeners who aren't from the Pacific Northwest, we need to explain Almost Live. This wasn't just public access. It was a cultural institution in Seattle.
It was. It was like a gritty local Saturday Night Live. It was the training ground for a lot of talent, including Joel McHale later on.
And this is where the science guy persona was actually born, almost by accident.
It's a great story. Nye is on the show, and he corrects the host, John Keister, on a pronunciation.
Right. Keister is talking about gigawatts, and he pronounces it gigawatt.
Which, to be fair, is Doc Brown's fault. Back to the Future ruined that word for a whole generation.
It absolutely did. So Nye, being the pedantic engineer that he is, he interrupts and corrects him. It's gigawatt.
And Keister gets annoyed.
He does, but he's playing it up for the camera. He snaps back. Who do you think you are? Bill Nye, the Science Guy.
And there it is.
And just like that, the branding was done. The audience laughed. The producers realized they had something. They let him start doing these 6-minute science segments.
But he didn't just do science. We have to talk about his other characters, specifically Speedwalker.
Oh, Speedwalker. This is peak physical comedy.
Describe him for someone who's never seen it.
Okay, imagine a superhero. He wears a spandex unitard and a helmet. He fights crime. But he has a fatal flaw, or perhaps a code of honor.
Which is?
He must strictly adhere to the regulations of the International Speedwalking Association.
So he's chasing a bank robber, but he has to keep one foot on the ground at all times and keep his legs straight.
Exactly. He is aggressively waddling after criminals. It is absurd. It is silly,
Yeah.
but it shows his willingness to commit to the bit.
And that commitment is what sold the Science Guy show later. He wasn't afraid to look silly if it got the point across.
Absolutely.
So fast forward to 1993, the sketch bits are working. He teams up with James McKenna, Aaron Gottlieb, and Elizabeth Brock. They develop the pitch for a full show.
And the pitch is brilliant. Just 4 words.
Mr. Wizard meets Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Think about that juxtaposition. Mr. Wizard was the gold standard of the 1950s and 60s. He was calm, deliberate, fatherly.
Very serious. Stood at a table and slowly poured chemical.
Exactly. Pee-wee's Playhouse was the exact opposite. It was chaotic, colorful, loud, fast, and surreal.
Merging those two sounds like a recipe for a headache, but it created a completely new genre.
It did. It took the rigor of Mr. Wizard and applied the pacing of Pee-wee. But there is a business side to this that is fascinating. The funding model was unique.
How so?
They secured underwriting from the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Energy.
So this was a government-backed initiative.
It was. This wasn't just a commercial venture. And because of that funding, the show had a legal mandate to actually educate. They couldn't just fill 22 minutes with slime and explosions. They had to teach specific curriculum standards.
But then the distribution was pure Hollywood.
It was. It was distributed by Disney's Buena Vista Television. This was unprecedented. It was the first program to run concurrently on public television, PBS, and commercial syndicated stations.
That explains why it felt like he was everywhere. You could watch him on PBS in the morning before school and then catch a rerun on the local Fox affiliate in the afternoon.
He blanketed the market. And the style, the so-called MTV style, was the key hook.
Rapid-fire cuts, weird camera angles, sound effects everywhere.
They recognized that the audience's attention span was changing. Kids were watching music videos. They're used to visual density, so the show mimicked that.
And the set, Nye Labs, it looked like a converted warehouse.
Because it was a converted clothing warehouse in Seattle. It felt gritty and cool. It didn't look like a classroom.
So the results, did it actually work as an educational tool or was it just entertaining?
It absolutely worked. The
Yeah.
show ran from 1993 to 1998. It won 19 Emmy Awards out of 23 nominations. Nye himself won Outstanding Performer in Children's Programming.
That's huge.
But more importantly, the National Science Foundation conducted studies. They found that regular viewers were significantly better at explaining scientific ideas, like how a phase change works or what a food web is, than non-viewers.
So the wacky sound effects didn't distract from the lesson, they cemented it.
Precisely. And it attracted a significant adult audience, too. I remember parents watching it and actually laughing at the jokes.
That cross-generational appeal is what gave Nye his staying power. He wasn't just that guy for kids, he was that guy who was funny and smart.
For sure.
But as with all things in show business, the ride eventually stopped. The show wrapped in 98, and the years immediately following were, let's call them the wilderness years.
They were. It's difficult to transition from a beloved character to, well, to just being a guy.
He tried a comeback in 2005 with The Eyes of Nye.
This was supposed to be the evolution. The premise was solid.
Yeah.
A show for the kids who grew up watching Science Guy. But now they are adults. So let's tackle adult topics.
Like what?
GMOs, race, nuclear energy, global warming. The heavy stuff.
But it flopped. Why? What went wrong?
A perfect storm of issues, really. There were production delays and budget cuts at the local station, KCTS.
Yeah.
There was executive infighting. But I think the biggest issue was a branding mistake.
The tie.
The tie.
Mm.
Nye tried to ditch the bow tie. He wore a straight tie.
He looked like an accountant.
He did. He wore a suit and a long tie. He looked like a banker. He later admitted, "It wasn't me." The audience had a cognitive dissonance. They wanted the manic energy and the quirkiness. Instead, they got a somewhat dry talk show host.
So it only lasted one season.
Just one.
And then he went through this phase of just popping up, cameos, reality TV. He was on Dancing with the Stars in 2013.
Which was a bit of a disaster.
Oh, yeah, he got hurt.
He tore his quadriceps tendon. He literally tripped over his own feet. It was painful to watch.
Yikes.
But again, he kept going. He appeared on The Big Bang Theory.
That was a fun arc. He played himself in a rivalry with Professor Proton, played by the legendary Bob Newhart. There was a plot line involving a restraining order.
It showed that Nye was willing to poke fun at his own celebrity status. He knew he was an icon, and he played into it. But during this period, he wasn't really leading the conversation.
He was a mascot.
That's a good way to put it. He was a mascot for science.
Until the streaming era hit.
Yes. Netflix gave him a massive platform with Bill Nye Saves the World in 2017, and then Peacock with The End is Nye in 2022.
The End is Nye was interesting because he teamed up with Seth MacFarlane.
Of all people.
And the tone, it wasn't science as fun anymore.
No. The theme was, disasters are coming, natural and unnatural, here is how we survive.
Yeah.
It explored supervolcanoes, comets, climate collapse.
Which brings us to the most significant evolution in Nye's career, the advocate.
This is where things get spicy. Because the science guy was universally loved, he was safe, but the science advocate started stepping on toes.
While science unfortunately interacts with politics and belief systems, you cannot talk about genetics or climate without entering the political arena.
And Nye decided he couldn't just stay in the lab mixing vinegar and baking soda. He had to engage with the public debate.
The big moment, the bellwether for this shift, was the debate with Ken Ham in 2014.
Ken Ham is a prominent creationist and the founder of the Creation Museum in Kentucky. He advocates for a literal interpretation of the Book of Genesis.
Young Earth, dinosaurs on the Ark, the whole 9 yards.
The whole thing. Now, in 2012, Nye had made a viral video claiming that teaching creationism to children was a threat to the future of U.S. science education.
He basically said, if we raise a generation that can't distinguish between faith and theory, we lose our edge.
And Ham challenged him to a debate. Now, the standard advice from the scientific community was, don't go.
Why? Why not debate?
Because it creates a false equivalency. If a scientist debates a non-scientist on a stage, it makes it look like there are two valid, equal sides to the argument. It elevates the fringe view.
But Nye went anyway.
He went to the Creation Museum. He stood on their stage. And for hours, they debated whether creation is a viable model of origins.
I remember watching clips of that. Nye's strategy was interesting. He didn't mock. He didn't get angry.
No, he just kept asking for evidence. He kept citing rock layers, ice cores, tree rings, starlight.
And at one point, the moderator asked, what would change your mind?
And Ham said, nothing. Nye said, evidence. That moment crystallized his position. He later wrote a book about it, Undeniable: Evolution and the Science of Creation.
He even toured the Ark Encounter with Ham later in 2016. It showed he was willing to enter the lion's den.
He was. But here's the thing about Nye. He's not dogmatic about everything. I found the GMO pivot really fascinating.
This is a great example of intellectual honesty. Originally, Nye was very critical of genetically modified organisms.
He was. He voiced concerns about what they might do to ecosystems or allergies. He was on the anti-side.
And then in 2015, he flip-flopped.
He did. He announced he had changed his mind. He now supports GMOs.
Why the change of heart?
He looked at the data. He visited the labs at Monsanto. He realized that the science showed no difference in allergy rates between GMO and non-GMO eaters. He realized his fears were not supported by evidence.
And he actually went back and rewrote a chapter in his book.
He did. He revised Undeniable to reflect his new understanding. That is significant. It demonstrates that he isn't just fighting for a team. He is fighting for what the data says.
If the data changes, he changes.
Which is the definition of a scientist.
But the topic where he's really taken the gloves off, or as he would say, the safety glasses off, is climate change.
This is the definitive shift of his late career. He went from the gentle educator to the urgent, sometimes angry activist.
We have to talk about the John Oliver appearance in 2019. This clip went everywhere.
He appeared on Last Week Tonight. He was discussing the Green New Deal and carbon pricing. He stood next to a globe.
And to illustrate the rising temperatures,
He took a blowtorch to the globe.
he just lit it up on television.
He torched it. And then he dropped the F-bomb. He said the planet's on effing fire.
I think my jaw hit the floor when I saw that. Bill Nye, the science guy, just cursed at me.
And then he looked right into the camera, took off his glasses, and said, "Safety glasses off, motherfuckers."
It was shocking, but it was also calculated, right? It was a deliberate move.
Absolutely. He was talking to the kids who grew up watching him. He was saying, I used to protect you. I used to make it fun. But now you are adults, and we are in a crisis. I'm not going to coddle you anymore.
It was a rhetorical wake-up call.
For sure. And he hasn't let up. Even as recently as October 2025, just a few months ago, he was at a protest in Washington, D.C.
The No Kings protest. This was a response to political shifts regarding executive power.
Right, and he was addressing the crowd, declaring, no thrones, no crowns, no kings.
Some people criticize that as being too political for a science communicator.
Perhaps. But Nye argues that science requires democracy. You cannot have free scientific inquiry if you have an authoritarian system that dictates truth. So for him, defending the Constitution is part of defending the scientific method.
It's a long way from Did you know that you can eat a marshmallow dipped in nitrogen?
It is. But he's also kept a foot in the actual hard science of space exploration. We shouldn't overlook his role at the Planetary Society.
He's the CEO. Yeah.
Executive director since 2010. And the Planetary Society was co-founded by Carl Sagan.
So he's literally sitting in his mentor's chair.
He is. And he advocates for space research and Mars exploration. And this brings us back to his dad. Remember this shadow story?
The sundial in the POW camp, of course.
Nye helped develop the Mars dial. When NASA sent the Spirit and Opportunity rovers to Mars, they needed a calibration target for the cameras, something to help them adjust the color balance.
And Nye suggested a sundial.
He suggested a device that acts as a photometric standard, but also functions as a working sundial. It tracks the time on Mars.
That's a direct tribute to his father's experience.
The directory.
That gives me chills. From a POW camp without a watch to a sundial on the surface of another planet, that is a legacy.
It connects the generations beautifully. It turns a trauma into a triumph of engineering.
Now, we can't do a deep dive without getting into the personal stuff. And Bill Nye has had, well, colorful personal life. He's usually pretty private, but some things have made the tabloids.
They have, yes.
Let's talk about the marriage that wasn't. Blair Tyndall.
This was back in 2006. He announced he was married to Blair Tyndall, a musician and the author of Mozart in the Jungle. It seemed like a match of intellectuals.
But 7 weeks later...
It was annulled.
7 weeks. What happened?
The marriage license was declared invalid. And then things got messy.
How messy are we talking?
In 2007, Nye obtained a restraining order. She allegedly broke into his house, stole his laptop, and, this is the bizarre part, damaged his garden with herbicide.
Wait, she attacked the science guy's garden with weed killer. That's poetic in a very dark way.
It was a very difficult, very public episode, but he seems to have moved past it. In 2022, he married the journalist Liza Mundy.
And there is a connection there, too, right, with her work?
There is. Liza Mundy wrote a book called Code Girls, which is about the female code breakers of World War II.
No way. So she wrote about women just like his mother.
Exactly. There is a deep thematic resonance there. They seem very happy.
Now, one thing people often ask is, does he have kids? Is there a science kid?
He does not.
Mm.
And the reason is rooted in biology and ethics. Nye has a family history of ataxia.
What is that?
It's a hereditary condition that affects balance and coordination. His father had it. His sister struggled with it.
And Nye, does he have it?
He says he dodged the genetic bullet. He has very minor symptoms, like the clumsiness we saw in Dancing with the Stars, but he isn't severely affected. However, he knew there was a high probability of passing it on.
So he chose not to have children.
He made a conscious choice not to.
That is a profound decision. To look at your own DNA and say, the buck stops here.
It's another example of him living by the data. He didn't want to bring a child into the world who might suffer from that condition.
Okay, before we get to the awards, I have to ask about the patents. You mentioned ballet shoes in the intro. Please explain.
It is true. He holds 3 U.S. patents. One is for an educational magnifying glass, basically a water-filled plastic bag.
Okay, that makes sense.
One is for a device to help athletes throw a ball. But the most famous one is for ballet-pointed shoes.
Why is a mechanical engineer redesigning ballet shoes?
He was watching ballet, and as an engineer, he looked at the shoes and thought, this design is terrible. The traditional pointillés shoe causes immense pain and damage to the dancer's foot. It crushes the toes.
So he just decided to fix it.
He designed a shoe with a different internal support structure, a new toe box, that distributes the weight more evenly and provides better support.
That is so Bill Nye. This toe box is inefficient and painful. I can fix this with physics?
It highlights his fundamental nature. He looks at the world, whether it's a 747 tail fin or a ballerina's shoe, and asks, how can we make this work better?
And he lives it too.
Yeah.
His house in Studio City is solar powered. He feeds power back to the grid.
And he has this friendly feud with his neighbor, Ed Begley Jr.
The greenest neighbor competition. They are constantly trying to outdo each other on who has the lowest carbon footprint.
It's wholesome, but it also normalizes green living. It shows that caring about the environment can be a part of everyday suburban life.
Which brings us to the present day. Or, well, the recent past. The last 2 years have been a victory lap for him.
It has been a season of recognition. In 2024, he finally got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That cements his status as an entertainer.
But the big one was January 4th, 2025, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
It is the capstone of his career. President Biden cited his ability to inspire generations of Americans to value science and truth. And I think that word truth is key.
In an era of deepfakes and misinformation, Nye has positioned himself as a defender of objective reality.
Exactly. He was the guest editor of Skeptical Inquirer just last year. He's doing vocals on Steve Aoki tracks.
Wait, what? He's on an EDM track?
He's on a track called Noble Gas.
Of course he is. That's perfect.
He's doing voiceovers for Disney rides. He is everywhere. He has become a cultural omnipresence, representing the idea that facts matter.
So let's wrap this up. We started by asking how he bridged the gap between Mr. Wizard and a climate firebrand. What's the verdict?
I think Bill Nye's career proves that pure science, as Sagan called it, isn't static. In the 90s, pure science meant getting kids excited about gravity so they would pass their physics tests.
Right. Keep it fun, keep it simple.
But in the 2020s, pure science meant defending the consensus on climate change against political opposition so we can survive as a species.
So the science didn't change, the stakes did.
Precisely. Nye didn't really change who he was. He was always a guy who wanted to explain how the world works. But when the world started denying how it works, he had to get louder.
He had to take the safety glasses off.
He had to. He is a synthesis of his parents' resilience, his engineering brain, and that stand-up comic who just wants an audience to react.
And he has succeeded. I mean, he has influenced the scientific literacy of millions.
No question.
So here is a final thought for you to chew on. Nye's career arc suggests that science isn't just about facts in a textbook. It's about how those facts are communicated.
Right. The delivery is everything.
So in a world of information overload where anyone can post anything, does the world need the gentle science guy of the 90s? Or do we need the angry, planet is on fire activist of today? Can one person effectively be both?
That is the question, isn't it? Which version is more effective now?
Think about that and ask yourself, how has Bill Nye influenced your understanding of the world? Did you become an engineer because of him? Did you start recycling? Or did you just learn that science rules?
Science does rule.
It sure does. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.